Hello, and welcome to Women in Retail Talks, the podcast where C suite executive women in the retail space share their stories of professional growth, leadership development, personal journeys, and more. I'm Marie Albajes, managing editor of Women in Retail, a membership based community of executive women at leading retailers and brands. Today, I'm joined by Mimi Swain, the Chief Commercial Officer of Ring and Blink, which you may know are owned by Amazon. We'll be talking about how she's really grown both brands, the future of the home security space, her leadership philosophy, and much more. So, Mimi, let's bring you in. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Marie. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yes, I am as well. I can't wait to hear kind of your career journey and what you've learned in your, I think, 9 years at the company. So, before we kind of get into the meat of our conversation, tell us a little bit about the products that you work on, Blink and Ring.
I'd love to. So, both Ring and Blink offer easy to use smart security products that keep people connected to their homes and businesses. Ring, of course, is known for inventing the video doorbell. And we see that most customers that come into the brand first buy a Ring doorbell. And then for Blink, on the other hand, it's really known for its versatile, battery powered cameras. And, with the Blink outdoor camera, that runs on two AA batteries and gives you 2 years of battery life. And so folks really love Blink for that. And at the root of both Ring and Blink is this idea of connection and keeping you connected to your home, to your pets, to your business, to your family, whatever you choose via the Ring or Blink app. And it's what people love about, what our products and services deliver. And then every time a customer opens up their Ring or Blink app or responds to a motion alert, they're connected to their devices. They can see what's happening. There's two-way talk, and so they're able to communicate with who's ever at the front door or around their home. And so, for us, that's really powerful, and it's what keeps people really engaged in our products and services, and really creates, a lot of opportunity for
Mhm.
us.
And I feel like in this day and age, the word ring is kind of eponymous with any doorbell camera. If someone has just a doorbell camera, it's referred to as ring, even though it might not necessarily be that brand. And I think that's over, the course of the brand's life, just really building that momentum.
Yeah, I think we've really cemented the way that, people engage with their home. We've really changed how we've empowered our neighbors, which is what we call our customers, the empowerment and engagement with their home, and really that expectation of what a Ring delivers to your home. And I love it. I see, tons of videos that show up through social that people say I caught it on my Ring camera, and it's not always a Ring, but really, like for us, I think we feel incredible pride and just like the trust that so many of our customers have in us and in the role that we play in their homes and businesses.
Yeah, so let's talk about how you got here, and I want to bring up, and maybe we'll post this along with the episode. But a week ago, you celebrated 9 years at the company, and you shared on LinkedIn, one email that you said changed your life, and it was a cold email to the founder of Ring. And so I'm wondering if you can start with kind of sharing that story of what you sent in that email and how it got you to where you are today.
Yeah, I'm actually happy to tell a little bit of like the backstory to that. But it was 2015, and I was working on this concept called Open House with Target, which was their take on the smart home of the future. And at the front of this house was a Ring video doorbell. And I thought it was really interesting. And so I remember asking about, what does this product do? And I lived in a house in LA that didn't have a working doorbell. And so I was really interested in this idea of a doorbell that I could answer, using my phone. And I liked that idea of a connection. I remember flying home and looking up the company and learning about the mission. And I felt so compelled that I needed to work at this place. And so I actually spent a little bit of time thinking about like how I was going to intercept, the founder of Ring. And I even went to like this meetup, like IoT, like LA startups, thinking I would intercept him there. And that was really like not the place to go to find them. And when I wasn't successful to find them that way, I decided to do the cold email. I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna send them a note and tell them what I'm all about and tell them I wanna work there." And so I did that, and so I shared, a draft of that email on my post about, "Here's my backstory. Here's the opportunity I see with this product, and I'm so excited by it, and I'd love to be part of the story, and here's what I can do." And it like I met Jamie a couple weeks later, and he hired me on the spot. And I think that one email was like the thing that really changed the trajectory of my career and in my life in some ways. And so I'm so grateful for that. And being at Ring and working on Blink, this is my dream job. And so I just consider myself incredibly lucky.
Had you done anything like that before? Like sent a cold email to a company that you really were interested in working at?
Absolutely not. No.
Really?
That's like nothing I would have ever done. I would have definitely been, in the track of like applying for a job on their job site or
Right.
maybe a LinkedIn post. And so I wouldn't have really thought of finding a job this way, but I felt so compelled by what Ring was doing and the promise behind the product, that promise of always home, that I was like, I will regret it if I don't work here.
Yeah. So, for those listening who are in transition, we were talking earlier about how we have a lot of members who are job searching or just kind of, poking their head into the market. Do you recommend that people, take this route for job searching? Does it sounds like it has to be, a company that you're really passionate about, but why go this route, you said, instead of, waiting patiently for the job posting to show up?
I think for me, I think there's so much about just my leadership style and really my approach that I think you have to go after what you want. And I'll tell people that I think that you have to chase the feeling that you have, even if it's irrational. And I think at Amazon, there's often this idea that's shared, or this sort of mental model around like, you have to be willing to be misunderstood for a really long time. And so I think that, for folks that are looking, I would say, chase that feeling and go after what you want and trust that like you can have like this new path and that like be okay with where it takes you.
Yeah. I know. I love your first point in that LinkedIn post, which is don't fear failure. If you're scared to speak up, send the email or make the decision, but have data telling you to move forward. And I think that that data speaks to that gut feeling of like, oh, I can't stop thinking about this company. I have to do something.
Absolutely. And sometimes not taking the action and not making a decision is the decision.
Mhm.
And I think you don't want to, you want to reduce that path to future regret.
Yeah. Has that shown up elsewhere in your career, that kind of passion and that, don't fear failure?
I think one of the things I always share about, career paths is this idea that like you really shouldn't be so focused on this idea of linear growth. And I'll say that earlier in my career, I think I was really focused on this idea of like, that there was this predetermined trajectory that you have in your career, that you can be an associate and then you're a manager and then you're a senior manager. And I think, what I learned early on was actually if you're curious about things and you say yes to opportunities and you take every opportunity you have to learn more, to grow your toolbox of experiences, I think that's a really important thing that is like really critical. And I think that's part of that, trusting that path that you're on and like where you can continue to grow that toolbox of experiences is really important.
Yeah, we hear that all the time from guests on this podcast is that that non-linear path is key. So I'd love for you, I mean, we talked a little bit about how you got to Ring, but tell us the before times of, what your career was like before Ring and then what happened, after you sent that email and met Jamie 9 years ago.
So I'm happy to talk through, a little bit of my career journey. I think that I have been so fortunate in my career. I've always had this incredible interest in consumer behavior and understanding, motivations behind why people decide to do certain things, why they buy what they buy. And I also really loved retail, and I've been lucky to use both as this platform for my career. And I have been lucky to work at Dyson and at Sonos, which is where I was before I joined Ring. And they were, these incredible brands that cared about customers, that cared about the experience. And I've taken so many of those things I've learned in those roles, with me in my career as it shaped the direction that it's taken. And so, I think there's just so many things that I would say don't, have a fear of failure. I think that you really have to, take it and take the lessons that you learn for it and apply it to the next challenge that you have.
Mhm. I think about a lot of the times, asking yourself, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? What's the worst case scenario? They say no. Okay, great. If that's the worst thing that's happening, then so be it. And, going back to not fearing failure, that's, it is what it is. And a no, what do they say? A no is just an opportunity for a yes down the road or something.
I think that's right.
So yeah, I love that. Okay, so then what about so you leave Sonos, you get hired at Ring, and what was your job title when you got hired at Ring, and then how did you make it to where you are today as chief commercial officer?
When I joined Ring in 2015, I was the director of channel marketing. They had one device. They had the Ring video doorbell, which is the original video doorbell, and they had gotten into a couple of retail stores. So they were in a test at Best Buy, they were doing this Home Depot test, and they had a Costco test that was coming up in the next month or so. And one of the things that Jamie cared a lot about was like, listen, we've gotten in the store, but I think you can help us stay in the store. And those first couple years were really partnering with the sales team to think about, what were ways that we could intercept shoppers in retail stores. We saw that we considered that placement in retail stores, part of a marketing expense, and that we were really showing up in ways to create credibility for the category. We were one of the first video doorbells in the category, really in the early days of smart home, and saw, retail and having a broad distribution strategy as one of the important things as we were thinking about customers and really giving customers a choice in where they buy our device. And so I think it was just really important that we like the way that we looked at retail, and the role that it played in marketing and driving credibility. And so I spent the first couple of years really focused on those retail partnerships and our strategies of how we grow there, especially as we expanded to other, doorbells and cameras and alarms, and as we had, this growth in our portfolio.
Mhm. And then at some point down the line, correct me if I'm wrong, but Amazon went and bought Ring and Blink. Were you a part of kind of that transition?
Yes, for me, because I've been with the company for 9 years, I've been with them through these, in some ways 3 stages. I was with them as an early employee. I think I was employee number 90. So I was with them through the startup, and the next phase, the Amazon acquisition, which was in 2018, and then really staying on with the business as we continue to scale, and grow in our innovation and portfolio, and as the teams grow, and really, we really thought about just where we were going as a business. And so I've been really lucky to be part of these 3 phases, in the business. And for us, by getting acquired by Amazon was really just this incredible opportunity for us to have more investment that allowed us to innovate quicker, that allowed us to hire more people and really just continue, to drive forward our mission.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, at what point did it stop feeling like a startup? Was it the day that Amazon acquired it, or did that kind of take a little bit more time?
Ring and Blink, I will say, still feel like a startup. I think we've
Really?
had really incredible support from the Amazon leadership team to allow us to continue to operate, in the ways that really work, for Ring and Blink. For many years we talked about, operating at the speed of Ring, and really just allowing us to continue to go after, the opportunities we saw. And so we just have, incredible support, to continue to do that. And so I definitely feel like one of the things I'm really proud of is just the spirit and culture we've been able to maintain through, these 3 phases. And so it still feels like a startup. It still feels like there's, that core group of folks that are still, with the business, that are still so passionate and driven about, our mission and the things that we want to do for
Yeah.
customers.
Any kind of campaigns or things that you've worked on that you're particularly proud of?
Yes, I have a couple actually. We consider, October doorbell season,
Yeah.
and it's Halloween is our busiest doorbell day of the year. And so we've had some really fun brand campaigns recently. So we just recently wrapped up Ring's Great Go Search, which was a campaign we kicked off in September, asking our Ring neighbors and customers to share footage of more mysterious things that are, captured on their camera. And so we've had a ton of fun with that. And then last year we had the $1 million search for extraterrestrials, our alien campaign, which I think was incredibly fun and really just showed how creative, people are. I think one of the things I wanted to maybe add on around is I think about growth for both brands, because both Ring and Blink, are at their core, these are, we're video service companies. And so for us, like, I think given where we are, where we're placed on the home at the front door around the home, like we get a ton of user generated content from our neighbors and customers of, that are capturing these like incredible moments that are happening at their front door. And so I think something I'm incredibly proud of is just like the role that we've played there. So we've seen footage of, first steps or kids talking to their parents who are deployed, or package deliveries and sort of the wild animal crossings that have been happening. And I think for me, I think that there isn't a day that I don't hear from a Ring neighbor about something that they captured at their front door, or the ways that we've really changed the way that they've interacted with their home and the connection that we're delivering with our products and services.
Yeah, that's interesting. How does that kind of user-generated content, how does that make its way onto your marketing platform? Are you using that on social media? Are you having like influencers? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think we have, a submission to social channels, so folks are able to like upload videos that they capture on their cameras to, social networks, whether it's Facebook or TikTok or Instagram. We also have an intake process that the team runs, where we also have a ton of videos that customers are sending to us directly, that they, captured, this wild animal crossing that happens at their home, that they share with us. And then, often we'll use that in campaigns that we're running through our social channels, within email, really just to share, these real life use cases of how people are using Ring and Blink in their homes. And so I think that's been really powerful part of storytelling for us around here's how these products are being used, and it's real and relatable.
Yeah. Yeah, how do you kind of see the future of like the home security space as it relates to Ring and Blink?
Security will, always be an important component of why people are, interested in our products. I think for us, we are very customer obsessed, that we think about, how we can invent and create delight for our neighbors and customers every day. And I think that's really important for us. I think, for us from a marketing side, I think we're always thinking about how we can reach, customers in new ways and meet them where they are. And I think, for example, we see a surge in interest around women's sports. I think it's about to enter its era of big business, and I think it's about time, and I think the growth is exponential. So I'm super excited to really explore those avenues as well, and showing up in those places where maybe customers haven't seen us before.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about just you and how you lead your teams. As the chief commercial officer, what does your kind of day to day look like? And well, let's start with that. What does your day to day look like?
Every day is different, so I'll say that. My organization oversees, a number of touch points across, the customer life cycle. So product discovery, marketing, e-commerce, sales, supply and demand. Those are groups that are in my function across Ring and Blink. And we really work closely with our product teams and partners to really determine, like what are our most strategic business priorities, how do we infuse the voice of the customer in the feedback that we're hearing, and how do we work that into our products, and how do we do that to reduce friction. And, from a focus area, my teams are really focused on driving, recognition, sales, and revenue for the business. And I consider myself incredibly lucky to work with this incredible crew of creatives and big thinkers and doers who are thinking about customers every day. And we have a ton of fun.
Yeah. How do you keep your teams motivated, especially, as this brand is growing so quickly and there's so much change in the world all the time?
I think first it always goes back to thinking about the customer. I think that these stories that we get, like the videos and the stories that we get from our neighbors and customers about how these products have changed their life, how it helps them feel connected to their home is really motivating for the team. It's a big reason why many of us are, at the business because we feel so passionate and engaged and really, committed to what we're delivering to our customers every day. And so I think that's a big motivator. But I think, for us, it's always really how do we continue to stay really focused on our customers and continue to event for them. And that's one of the big motivators.
Yeah. And I guess that goes back to, what you were saying at the beginning when you sent that cold email of like, as long as you really believe in the brand and put the mission of the brand at the center, that's going to really drive your work, right?
I think that's so important for engagement that people feel deeply connected to the work we're doing every day. I think that's really important.
Yeah. So I've heard you mention that as a child, were taught a lot about grit and perseverance. I know you're a child of immigrant parents who probably came with their own, values around grit and perseverance. So how does that show up for you as a leader?
Thanks for asking that. I think I consider myself incredibly lucky, to have the parents that I have, to have been born in the US. My parents were immigrants. They came from Vietnam in the early 80s and I was lucky to be born, in the US, and they set this incredible example for me when it came to, staying focused, to having grit, even when things don't go as planned. And that you think about, when you have the setback, that it's important that you continue to keep moving forward and that those experiences will help you in the future. And so they just had this incredible expectation that they gave up so much. They left their friends and their family to come to the US. And so in some ways there was sort of this unspoken, although they did remind me of it regularly, that like I owed it to them, that we, like my siblings and I, owed it to them to like do something with, like to really focus on education and to do something with our lives. And so I think that was just a big part of, what shaped my values. I also grew up in the Midwest. I'm from Kansas. And I think that's a big part of my values also as a leader. And I think that's helped me as a marketer to think about how to make things very relatable and real. And I'm really proud of it.
Yeah. No, I totally relate to that. My parents are immigrants from France. We actually immigrated to the States when I was 2. And so like talk about, the amount of energy and challenges that come with going to a new country when you don't speak the language. And, it's the 90s for you. It sounds like it was the 80s for your
Mhm.
parents. I mean, it is so difficult and so trying. And to come out on the other side of that successful because they wanted to give their kids the American dream is something really special. And it sounds like, we're both seeing the value of that,
Yeah.
many moons
Yeah, I
later.
know. I think it's like the incredible amount of resilience they have to like take
Mhm.
that chance, right? Like my big chance, like my big risk was I sent the email. Like for them, it was like it was so much bigger. And just like I think it's just humbling to like think about that. And so I feel
Mhm.
so, motivated by it. And that I think because of it, like I always want to, I feel really lucky for the opportunities that I've had through my parents and throughout my career. And for the folks that helped me, that I always want to try and bring other folks with me as I rise. And so I think that's just been a big part
Mhm.
of, I feel lucky and I've got to sort of pay this back, and I'll do it in a number of different ways, but like I want to bring people up with me.
Yeah, I love that. You also often talk about the bittersweet reality of leadership, and the fact that you're investing in your people only to see them leave at times. So, you've talked about that before. How do you approach this balance, and how has it kind of shaped your philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I think about what I was just saying about my parents, I think the opportunities created for me have always made me feel like I owed it to others to give them, my energy to help move them forward. And I find this immense joy in lifting people up alongside with me. And it's this idea of like me paying it forward that's really shaped my leadership
Yeah.
style. I think when you're in the trenches every day with these with folks, like the people that you work with, you form these communal bonds. Like you end up being this community. But it doesn't go on forever. And so you do have to learn to like let go. When people are ready to move on. And I think for me as a leader, like my role is to help people get to where they want to be ultimately, and for me to play my part in helping them get there. And so I'm so grateful for the connections I've made that have lasted, decades. And I love helping people see their full potential and pushing them, to reach for it, and being that, being there for them to support them when they need it. And so that's just so important to me.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, being a good leader is about the person that you're leading, not the work that they're doing or the successes that they're bringing the company. And so I love what you said about, helping them get to where they want to be, even if it's not within the company that they're currently working for.
Yeah, I think, because of these relationships we forge, like it's hard to see them move on. But I think for me, there's also this sense of pride to watch them succeed and to like, to go all the places that they want to go.
Okay, so we only have a few minutes left. So tell me, we're nearing the end of 2024. You just had this big, October Halloween campaign. What are you looking forward to professionally or personally in the new year?
So professionally, I think, I am, really excited for the innovations that we have, across Ring and Blank. I think for Ring, we recently announced a feature called Smart Video Search that brings together computer vision, AI, and our motion detection to help customers quickly find, specific video clips for the history by, typing in a few words. So for me, I look search for possum to look up, this gang of critters that like to hang out around my house in LA. But I think I'm really excited for, to talk more about like these features and how our products continue to get better. And then for Blink, we have a feature that launched this year called Moments that really stitch together, it takes, because there are multiple cameras around, a Blink household, it takes these clips from multiple cameras to stitch it together to create like this full story of what's happening around the home. And we announced it earlier this year, and I'm, really excited to talk more about it. We had a customer in British Columbia who had cameras in and around his garage and caught multiple bears. I mean, he was totally fine, all in one clip that we're excited to get out and share, through our channels, and really use this footage as a big part of our storytelling. So I continue to be really excited about that. I think there are things in women's sports that we're looking at that I'm really excited about, on the professional side. And then for me personally, my family and I were doing a big trip, this summer, and we're planning on spending a couple weeks in Europe. And so I'm super excited for that time. I think travel is really, a source of inspiration. So I'm excited to like have those moments, with my husband and kids, and for all the memories we'll create there. But I think I'm super excited for that.
Awesome. And yeah, it sounds like the features that you mentioned that are forthcoming for Ring and that you launched recently for Blink, it sounds like those are really kind of the next natural progressions given all of the tools that we have at our disposal and all of the technology of like that AI search
Mhm.
function, the moments. I mean, it sounds like that's definitely like the path that a lot of brands are taking. So I'm excited to see all of that roll out, and excited for your trip to Europe. That sounds amazing. Before I let you go, any other kind of words of wisdom for the next generation of female leaders that might be listening?
I said it earlier in the podcast, but I think it's just really important for folks to go after what they want. Like I think that's just a really important, mental model to keep, as they go in their career, but like take those chances and don't be afraid to fail and go after what you want.
That's great advice to wrap things up. Mimi, thank you so much. It was wonderful talking to you, and I can't wait to see what you do in the future. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. For more information on this podcast, please go to womeninretail.com/podcasts for show notes. Women in Retail Talks is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. Make sure to subscribe on our podcast channel page as well. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a few moments to rate and review our show. Lastly, if you're a female retail leader interested in joining our community at Women in Retail Leadership Circle, visit womeninretail.com/apply. Thanks, and until next time, this has been Women in Retail Talks.